All right, guys, you would not believe this is the fourth time I'm recording this video. So hopefully this is the charm. But anyway, so what we're going to talk about today is the actual CSS. So before we get into fun of Photoshop, where we can bedazzle the heck out of this, we need to go over some of the CSS elements that we're missing. And what I discovered last class, which makes so much sense, is instead of showing it to you in Dreamweaver, I can really just show it to you in W3 Schools, because if we need to try something, they have the try it up for us to do. So you'll start seeing me type all this up when we get into Photoshop and start marking this up for our to be a web page. But for now, so the tab that we have been working in so far has been the HTML tab, and that's the one over here. So when you got to W3 Schools, and you go there and you click on HTML, that's the tab that we've been working in. And we got pretty much down to the iframes. Not many more that we're going to go into as far as HTML for the remaining classes. I do want to go through semantics, entities, and stuff, but that's not this class. But so we do have a few more tabs to go through, or a few more lessons to go through in HTML, but pretty much we are pretty set for the basic HTML portion of the course. So we're going to go into now, but we will be going into others. I don't want you to think that it's over. But also, before we get started, I want to make sure that you know that HTML, we talked about this before, but I like to hit it home because this is super important. Your HTML is the most important part of your website. It is your structure. So you really want to make sure that that HTML is solid. It is the same as the foundation of your house. Everything else is gorgeous in your house, and how you have it set up, and how you know, the stuff that you put on the wall, the carpet that you've chosen, the furniture that you've chosen, that's your CSS, right? So that's beautiful. However, if that foundation wasn't solid on your house and your house started falling apart, none of that stuff that you put in it would even make a difference. It would have been a failed project, right? It would have been a failed house. So with the CSS and HTML, it's the same thing. The HTML is your foundation. It is when people come and they have screen readers, or they have low bandwidth and things like that, they will be able to see that HTML. It will display. And the purpose of any website is informational in some way. Some way you're either trying to get information out to the client, or you're trying to get information out to the client, or you're trying to sell something, or you're trying to get input and stuff from them, or what have you. But the main purpose of your website is that information. So that has to be protected at all costs, right? So even if you have to sacrifice CSS for your HTML, guess what? That HTML is on top always. So the HTML has to be solid. That is the most important building block of your web page. Then we get CSS, and that's when you beat it with the pretty stick and you start adding stuff, and you're saying, oh, I want this to be here, I want this to be there, I want this to look like this or that. And it becomes a beautiful site. But that HTML has to be solid. So looking at this example, this HTML, that is the solid. This is where you're giving them the information. This is where you're telling them, like, let's say it was for an event. Oh, this event's going to be on this day. It's going to happen at this time. You got to go here to sign up for the event, right? So that's the main solid information of your page, and that has to be solid, all right? The CSS is secondary to the HTML, okay? If you do not have a solid HTML site or a solid structure, then that's a failed website. All right, so now we'll go over here to this next tab, which is the CSS. And this is where we get to have a little fun and add our pizzazz and stuff to our website. So this is just the main page. In this page, it's going to show you, examples, and it's going to show you like templates and how to use the menus. It's going to tell you information about how to take the quizzes. And the references and stuff like that, and to get your certificate. So that's what the homepage does. So now let's go ahead and get started in our CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. CSS, this is the part that we haven't gone into yet. So we've already done inline styles, which are the styles that are inside of the start tag of whatever HTML element we're trying to affect, right? So that was where we went inside, say, the H1, and we said, ooh, all H1, we want this H1 to be red, or we want this H1 to be orange, or we want this paragraph to be blue, or what have you, or we want it to be this size and this font and that stuff. So that's the CSS that is inline. It is in line with whatever HTML element you want it to affect, okay? So that means if we had 50 H1 tags that you wanted it to affect, then we would need to type that style into all 50 of those H1 tags that we wanted it to affect, okay? Now, with what we went with over last week, which was embedded styles, and those are the styles that sit inside of the head element and inside of the styles element, right? So we had the head element right before the closing. We put the style element in there, which was the start and end tag for styles. And then inside of styles is where we started the CSS, where we did the selector and the declaration and the declaration blocks for each element that we wanted to affect. This week, we're going to be talking about CSS, which is the cascading style sheet, which is the linked style sheet. And what happened, so with the embedded, let me go back to that one. Sorry, go back. So with the embedded style sheets, if we wanted that H1 tag, remember how with the inline, we had 50 H1 tags, and we had to go into each of the 50 ones to style them. But if you have embedded, which is the one that sits inside of the head element, which sits inside of the styles element, that one, now you can affect H1 all at once. You can say, all right, H1s, I want them to be red, and it's going to affect every single H1 tag on that page, which is cool, right? It saves you some work. But then when we have cascading style sheets, let's say we had 300 pages in our website, right? And so all H1 tags for each page, right? So instead of having to put it in the head of all of the pages, right? All 300 pages, now we have the style sheet that we can link, and we can affect all 300 pages at once. So that means that anywhere on our page where there's an H1, let's say there are thousands of H1 tags, it's going to give them all the effect of red. So each style element or each different style has a different level of what it affects. Inline affects each line of element that we want it to affect. And then we have embedded, which affects each page. So all the elements on that page. And then we have the cascading style sheets, which are linked, which is going to affect the entire website as a whole, no matter how many pages that we have. Okay. So that part's really, really cool that it does that. Now, there's also this called specificity. I usually mess up that word. I didn't today. So what happens with that is then there's a hierarchy, because the next question usually comes of, well, what if you used all three? And which one, has priority over the other? They work kind of in the reverse order, right? So you have the style sheet, that's your lowest priority. Then you have embedded, which can overwrite the style sheet. And then you have inline, which can overwrite them all. So they each have reasons to use them. They each have, their priority of order and stuff like that. So that's a little tidbit of information. And I'm sure they're going to cover it in here as well as we progress. So let's see. I went over almost everything. Okay. All right. And then this is the thing of why I use it pretty much to style your page. And so back in the day, so this is what it's talking about with CSS solved a big problem. Back in the day, your CSS, so back in the day, CSS didn't exist. We had to use HTML to style our pages. Well, that becomes a nightmare. So remember I said with style sheets, screen readers, the cool thing about those is they can turn it off, right? So screen readers can turn off your CSS so that the viewer gets that important information. Browsers can also turn it off if the bandwidth is low or things like that, so that the viewer can get the information that's intended for them to get. Now, what happens with that is that's why your information has to be tight, right? And solid and sound so that the viewer gets all the information that you need them to get. Back in the day, they were trying to style it inside of the HTML tags, and that became this whole big mess. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare for developers. It was a nightmare for different browsers. It was a nightmare for the screen readers. It was a nightmare for a lot of things, style engines, everything. It just became a mess. So thankfully, CSS was invented to solve this problem, and it has been amazing ever since. It really has. So that's what this part is talking about. It goes in more detail. You guys can read all that, and I just talked to you about how it saves a lot of work where you can change one file. So definitely read through that. All right, and we talked about this some too, because we couldn't write the CSS without knowing the syntax. But there are syntax, just like there's the HTML syntax with the, with the tag and the attributes. Then with CSS, there's the selector, the declaration block, and then inside is the property value pairing. So just to break this down just a little bit, so the H1, so the selector is what HTML element do you want me to affect? So just pretend and I don't want to say this name because then she's going to come up, but we'll try it. But anyway, just pretend you're talking to Siri, right? So if you're talking to her, then you're saying, you know what that term you say, and then you say, Siri, I need you to do this, or I need you to do that. So we're going to pretend we're talking to the browser. So we're saying, hey, browser, I want you to affect my H1 tags, right? So we're in CSS, and we're talking to the browser, and we're saying, hey, browser. So that's with the selector. We're saying, hey, browser, and the browser says, hey, and we're saying, hey, I want you to affect the H1 tag, right? So then the browser says, okay, all right, so that's what we're talking about. We're talking to the H1 tag, right? So on the H1 tag, I want the H1 tag to have the color of blue. So the property is color, the value is blue, right? So when you're dealing with CSS, you have declaration blocks, right? So the declaration block is from the open curly brace to the closed curly brace, and everything inside of that is your declaration, and each declaration is a property value pairing. So if we were talking to the browser right now, and in between the declaration, right? So we're saying property, the colon ends the property. So you're telling the browser, hey, this is where the property ends. And then we're saying, I'm ready for the value. We give it a value, and then we end it at the semicolon. So after every semicolon, that's your declaration. So your declaration is your property value pairing, okay? And the semicolon is the colon is the separator of the property and value, and the semicolon is the end of that declaration, all right? And then we have another declaration that sits inside of this declaration block, okay? Because the declaration block is that block of information, property values that sit inside of the curly braces. So if we were to talk to the browser, let's pretend this is a sentence right now, and we were talking to the browser, we would be saying, hey, browser, here's what I want you to do to the H1s, right? So all my H1 tags, I want them to have the property of the color, and I want the color to be blue. That's the value that I want them to have. Also, because I ended it right there, right? Also, I want the font size to be 12 pixels. So this is our syntax, and it has to be written the proper way, our CSS syntax, or the browser will ignore it because it doesn't know what you want, okay? So our H1 is our selector. So even if we wanted to select the paragraph, it would be a P. If we wanted to select the body, it would be body. If we wanted to select the footer, it would be footer. So whatever we want it to select, that's the selector. This is how we're telling CSS, hey, I want you to do this to that, okay? So then, went over that. All right, sweet, yep, went over that. So you can read that in detail just to get it in different words if you want, but that's pretty much everything that I just explained. So in this example that is showing here, it's showing the paragraph, and we're saying, hey, all the paragraphs, I want to be the color red, and I want the text align center. So if we look at this and we go into the browser, and this is how this one works. When you hit the try it, try it yourself, it's going to open up the try it yourself browser, and you're going to get to see what it looks like. But if you want to, so let's say we said, okay, well, instead of red, we want to change the color to blue, right? And then we want the text aligned maybe to the right. Okay, so speaking of that, and we'll get into that, but this is how you align your text, same way you do in Microsoft Word or any other program where you're saying left, middle, center, justified. This is how you would set up your text. Okay, that's how you affect it with the text dash align. Also, remember when you're dealing with CSS, you're combining two words, you combine them with the dash in CSS, right? So when we're talking in CSS, we combine the two words with the dash. All right. So all I have to do now, once I make those changes, I can click run, and you're going to see that it actually follows what we say. So if we wanted to, let's say, add font size, which we've been doing, and let's say we wanted to set this at, so notice I did the font dash size because I'm combining two words, right, with the dash. I hit my colon, which says, hey, I'm finished with my property. Now I'm ready to add my value. So now my value, I might say font size. Maybe I want this to be 20 pixels, right? Notice also how that changed to blue. So one thing that it also does, notice when I go back to here, the bottom one changed to blue. So it's giving us those clues to tell us something is wrong, because we already know, looking at the other ones, that the property should be red, but our property all of a sudden changed to blue. So it's kind of telling you, hey, something's wrong. I'm not really ready to read this next line because you don't have it correct up here. So make sure you're paying attention to the colors. They really mean something. If something is off and that color is off, something is wrong. All right. So, and if you wait till you get further down to correct it, what's going to happen is you're going to forget what's going on, because it doesn't always show you exactly where that issue is. Ours is showing us now, but later on, it might not show you exactly where that issue is. So just keep that in mind. Look at those colors. Make sure your colors are the way this should be. All right. So font size, I forget. I think I said 20 pixels. Okay. So when I do that, I hit run, and you're going to see it complies to what we want. So if we also wanted to do font weight, 2 words, right? Combine those 2 words with, and also spell it right. Combine those 2 words with, there we go, with the dash. Oh, goodness. Okay. And then, so font weight, I might say bold. And when we hit run, we're going to see that it pretty much complies. I might change the font size because maybe I want a bigger size. Hit run, we're going to see that it complies with the size. So definitely play in here, and, with whatever, thing you want to style. But pretty much that is your property value pairing. We said, hey, color blue. This is our selector, right? The P. And then this is our declaration block, because it sits inside of the curly braces, kind of like with HTML, right? When we were talking elements, I'm just saying. So this is our declaration block, right? From the open curly brace to the closed curly brace, right? And then we have our color, right? So we have our declaration, each declaration, right? Each declaration is this. So the declaration runs from the property all the way to the semicolon, which ends it. So we have the property, the colon, which ends the property. Then we have the value and the semicolon, which ends the value, right? And all this ends that declaration block. All right. So that being said, that's pretty much how you try it, and just play. And we're going to do that a little bit more. And then this pretty much is just explaining the same thing I said: the selector, the property value, text line center, property value, blah blah blah. Okay, awesome. All right, we'll go to the next one. All right, so we're not worried about anything else on this page except for this one. The rest of the stuff goes into more advanced CSS selectors. You are welcome to play with that, but only after you 100% understand this part, because that part can confuse you and has confused a lot of students. So I want to make sure that you know that you're only responsible for understanding this one right here, the Simple CSS Selectors. That's what we've been working in. That's what we're working in the body, right? So we're working in just the name, which is the tag name, the IDs, and the classes. And remember, the ID has a symbol in front of it, which is the hashtag in CSS only. That symbol is only in the CSS only, right? Because it's how the tag or the attribute calls to the CSS. So it's ID, hashtag, class, period. And then the name doesn't need one because it's automatically programmed. So names are things like body, H1, paragraph, and then remember the ID attribute was how we put the label on the boxes, and stuff like that. So, and remember another thing about ID and classes that we learned last week, IDs are specific, meaning that and they're special, they're unique. So IDs are used one time per page. So we put the ID on wrapper or container or what have you, but it's an ID used one time per page. And then class, we can use several times on several different things on the page. Okay. And I think it breaks it down a little further, and we'll go into that in a second. So that again, let's see. Right. And this is explaining exactly what I said. The ID is specific, unique within the page, one unique element on the page. So I mean, use one time per page. And then to call to it, you call to it with the hashtag for the ID. So in this example, it's anything that has the ID of peril gets the text aligned center and the color of red. If you want to look at that, this is what it looks like in HTML. That's peril. That's the text aligned center, right? So it's centered, and the color would be red, right? So if we wanted to play in here, let's say we gave it, so this ID for Hello World, we said font size, and maybe we want it a little bigger. Maybe we want it to be 30 pixels. And then also maybe we want the font weight. And if you're wondering where we get these, like where am I knowing where they are, there is a listing of the different CSS selectors. And I'll show you where that is in a second. The bold, so if we wanted that, we can run that, and now we have the 30 point pixels and that it is bold. Okay, so and that's only affecting anything with peril. So if we go down here, we'll see that the paragraph that has the ID attached to it of peril, hello world, and that's what it's affecting. Notice this other paragraph is not affecting that because it does not have an ID attribute attached to it. Okay, so this is the second paragraph. It's not affecting that because that attribute is not attached to it. Okay, now that's the ID. Now, if I wanted to, and it's going to talk about class in a second, I'll just add another ID since we're talking about IDs. So I'm going to close that declaration because that declaration is for peril, right? So I'm going to add another one, and I'm going to say hashtag fun stuff, because you can name it whatever you want. And if this is unique, and then I'm going to make sure I do that open curly brace to create this declaration, the closed curly brace, and then inside of here, I'm going to start adding my features that I want fun stuff to have. Let's say fun stuff, I want the text align to be right. And remember, I'm two words, so that means I'm combining it with the dash. And then text align, I might want it to be, I said right. And then let's say I wanted the color to be green. About to be Christmas theme, y'all. And then let's say I wanted the font size of this one to be 20. And then maybe I want the font weight to be code. And then what else I want to add? All right. And if we run it, we're not going to see anything happen because I haven't assigned it yet. See that? Nothing happened. So what I'm going to do is make another paragraph. Then I'm going to say, make sure I do my close at the same time. So I love working in here because it doesn't give you the close paragraph automatically. You have to close it yourself. Now, you guys might have messed it up for my next batch of students because I'm probably going to have them do it in here. Yep. All right. So now I might say something like, this is to show you how the how the tags, IDs, and classes link to your link from your HTML and to CSS and vice versa. Okay. So when I hit run, all you're going to see is that this shows up because I created another paragraph. But if I want to affect that paragraph, so notice in CSS, right, it is the hashtag of fun stuff. So now I have to connect that to my HTML so that this paragraph reads it. And so the hashtag is only used in a CSS, guys. Only the hashtag and the period are only used in the CSS. To call to it in HTML, you're going to do the same thing you did here, where I would take the p tag, I would extend the functionality of that p tag with an attribute. So I'm going to space so I can open it up. I'm going to say ID. It's an attribute, right? So ID equals quote, quote. And then so I'll step inside of those quotes and I'll say fun stuff, which I've camel cased because remember, you can't have spaces in the web. So either you can camel case, you can dash, or you can underscore. That's how you can combine the two words when you're naming it. So I'm going to name this fun stuff, and I'm going to run it. And now you'll see that it is taking on the rules that I gave it, right? And all I did, I have the CSS up here. It knows I've categorized it. So watch though. Watch what happens if I get rid of this, because sometimes students accidentally forget. Notice now it's ignoring it, right? It has to have that call. It has to call to this ID, right? So to call to that ID, I need to have that hashtag. Then when I run it, it'll pay attention, okay? So super important. I just want to make sure I hit this home of how they link. So in HTML, you're linking it by giving it a label, right? To link to. So we're giving it a label here. We're saying ID of fun stuff. Then when we get into CSS, we're saying, okay, so here's what I want to happen with fun stuff. Hashtag fun stuff. Now let's give it these rules that I want it to follow, okay? All right, so I'm going to go over here and I want to show you where that reference is. Matter of fact, I don't lose our page. I'm just gonna make a new tab real quick. All right, so I want to show you where that reference is. So remember when we were at the home page, remember home, down here tells you where the references are. So this is the CSS property reference, the selector reference. These are really the main ones. The color reference we'll be messing with as well. But if you wanted to know the CSS property reference, you can click here. And this is where I know, I can choose align content, or I can choose align items, or I can choose background color, or I can choose background image, position, repeat. This is where I know. So when you saw me type in like font weight and align color, they're all coming from somewhere. They're coming from the reference. I didn't pull them out of my head. These do not sit in my head because I can't remember them all at all. So I pulled them from here. So go through, feel free to play. If you click on it, it's going to take you to where you can try it yourself as well. Okay, so I just want to make sure you guys know that. All right, so yeah, and as a matter of fact, if I want to put a background color on this one, I can. The background color of yellow. And then when I refresh it, you'll see that now Hello World has that background color of yellow. If I wanted to give it some padding, right, like where I want the top and the bottom to have some padding, I can go padding, 20 pixels. And now when I run it, it's got some padding on the top, the bottom. You won't see the left and right because it's centered, but it's got some padding on the left and right. So if I change this justification now to say left, you're going to see that it's 20 pixels over. Instead of touching the edge, it's 20 pixels over to the left. And if I were to change the padding just to show you what I mean, like to 40, you'll see it moved out some on all sides. So really the key thing is that this is where it links, right? So you're linking that CSS here to your HTML here, right? So you're saying, oh, this is the ID of this. And then if you wanted to affect, because right now I'm showing you how it affects your IDs, but let's say you want to affect the paragraph period. You know, you got that paragraph that's down there. So we'll just make a declaration for the paragraph. We got our selector in there. We'll make the declaration and we'll say, okay, maybe we want to affect the color. And maybe we want to spell it right though. Maybe we want to affect the color, and maybe we want the color to be orange. You know, orange, right? So if I run that, then now you'll see that our sorry to turn the heat down. Now you'll see that our text has turned and is following that. So here's what I also want to drive home. Again, so this is a regular HTML tag, right? So because it's a regular HTML tag, we don't need a symbol. So here's what you need to know. If you don't have an ID attribute, if you don't have a class attribute, then it is just a tag, right? If it's just a tag like this, you can affect it. You don't need a symbol in CSS. So if I want to affect body, let's say body, I want to give a background color. I don't know. DY. Right, so make sure I get that closing declaration. And so if I want to say body and I want to give it a background color, maybe I want to give a background color of midnight. I don't even know if that's a color, but we're going to try it. Midnight blue. Live on the edge. Nope, that's not a color. All right, we'll try navy blue then. Or just navy. It might just be midnight. I don't know. Oh, or you might have to spell it right. That's also a thing. Oh, it is a color. Sweet. So if I want to give the background color of midnight blue, I can, and it's going to affect that body tag. No symbol needed for those. So if it doesn't need a class and it doesn't need an ID, then you don't need a symbol. And if I wanted to put, let's say, because we learned about divs last week. So let's say we want to give, let's say we want to div this out. So let's say we want to give a div, right? Okay. So remember, if we just do div, where we, goodness, I tell you guys, I'm sorry. So if you want to do div, where we have an open, we must have a close. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one out down here. And then remember, what do I want to do to make sure that we know that this div, we know the identity of this div from any other div is I want to give it that comment. So I'm going to go to comment. Okay, so I made a comment tag. So inside of here, now I can type in wrapper or container or whatever word you want. You just have to make sure it makes sense. So I have the wrapper. Now I need to go to this div up here that we created. Let me see if I can make this larger. I want to make sure you guys can see it. Hopefully that helped. Let me move body down some. Okay. So if I want to now I have to go to this div and I have to give it an ID because right now it's just a box, right? So just to show you that you can actually style a div, but the issue is you're going to have other divs. And if you have other divs, whatever you do to that one div is going to affect all of them. So it's just best practice to go ahead and give this div an ID or a class. So maybe since we're talking about IDs, we know about class. Now I'll give an ID. All right, ID equals quote quote. Okay, so the ID that I might give it might be home. All right, so now, nope, that's not what I said. I said wrapper. Why you guys let me do that? Wrapper. All right, so div ID of wrapper. So now if we run it, we're not going to see anything happen because we didn't do anything. But if I go up here and it's an ID, so you guys already know I need to call to it. I need what symbol in front of it? I know you said it. I know you said it. Yep, you're absolutely right. I need the hashtag, right? So let me go ahead and set up the declaration block for this. And then now let's say I want wrapper to be width. Maybe maybe I want the width to be 90%. So when I say 90% for the width, I'm actually saying I want the width to be 90% of the browser, because that's what body is. Body is whatever size your browser is, right? So that's body. And then when we're talking wrapper, wrapper sits inside of the body. So now I'm saying, okay, well, I want the wrapper to be 90% of the body. And if we run this, we'll see that this stuff came in some, right? You saw how it came in from the edges, but you don't really know what's happening. It came in from the right side, and that's because typically everything that goes in the browser goes from top to left. So that means that this box that I just made a wrapper is on the left side. And to see that, because right now you're like, I don't see anything happening, let's give it a background color. We'll give it a background color of, I'm running out of colors, guys. Let's try sky blue. I'm running out of colors from my memory. There are lots of colors that are actually in there, and you'll see it. Oh, and I accidentally hit save. All right, now if I run this, now you'll see the wrapper, right? Now you can see that the wrapper is sky blue. Ooh, I'm going to change that orange because that is hurting my eyes. I'm going to say white. Okay, so the wrapper is sky blue. You'll see that you'll see what it's wrapping around, right? So it's wrapping around whatever that, remember HTML's job is to stack boxes. So it's wrapping around that last box of information that is right here, okay? So now if I wanted to add, because this is my pet peeve, text being on the edges, so I'm going to add some padding, right? Padding happens on the inside of the box. Margin happens on the outside of the box. Remember that. Padding happens on the inside of the box. Margin happens on the outside of the box. So I'm going to add some padding. I'm going to say 20 pixels. All right. I keep hitting save because I'm thinking I'm in Dreamweaver and I'm not. All right. So now we've added some padding to that, right? Padding happens on the inside of the box. So padding is this wrapper box. This wrapper box is blue. So what I also encourage you guys to do as you're building, change the background color so you can see what's actually happening. Background colors help me with troubleshooting when I'm troubleshooting students, projects, of course, and also especially my own. So you can see what's happening. So, and then you can just get rid of the background color. When you know you got everything set and you're happy with it, just get rid of it. So, but just for now, just give that tidbit. Okay. So now I see that this is my wrapper that I added, and all outside of here is my body. Okay. What else? Let me see. I think I went over okay, so that's ID. Let's go into class. So the class selector, same as ID, except for the class can affect multiple things at once. You're characterized by that period, right? So it's going to be that dot that we use. So for this one, it's affecting, it gave a class of center. You see that? And just so that you know, well, let's stick with this right now. So it gave a class of center, and then center is the text align center and the color red. So if we hit try it yourself, you're going to see that, oh, okay, so now this, anything that has this class attached to it, the center is centering it red. Also note that, so we have this class attribute here called center. It's affecting this one a red, but we could also put it on the P tag, right? Because remember, classes, you can put multiple places, right? But IDs, you only do once. So if we look at the example that we were working in, we have this ID for wrapper, it's only used once. Then we have another ID for Peril, only used once. Then we have another ID for fun stuff, only used once, right? But then if we go to classes, this class is used twice on this one, okay? So if I had another set of, another paragraph, and let me just do H2 so I can get, okay. All right, so, all right, so I have my H2 tag. And so in here, or H2 element, and in here, I want this to say, yes, let's see what happens. All right, so that's my H2. If I run it, that's what it looks like. But what if I wanted that same class, right? That class equals center to be on that one. All I got to do is click here, class equals center. So now adding that to that, if I run it, then we'll note that it's following. So we have 3 lines of text that are all following the same class, because a class can affect multiple things on the page at once, whereas an ID can only be used one time to affect whatever is unique to your page. So wrapper really is unique to our page. And typically on these, I only did IDs because we were talking about IDs, but I could change these, right? I could change them to classes. And the symbol for classes is the period, right? So I'm gonna go and change that. I won't change wrapper though, because wrapper is unique and only used one time per page, right? So wrapper is gonna stay ID. Stay in ID. But fun stuff in Peril. Now, if I run this, what you're going to see is everything goes back to its normal state. And that's because I haven't identified that this is a class inside of my HTML. I only changed it in my CSS. So I changed Peril to a class. I changed fun stuff to a class. And wrapper, you're still seeing it because wrapper is an ID, right? So what I need to do now is, instead of having ID for Peril, I need to change that to class. And then I need to change fun stuff from ID to class, because I just changed the symbol. So when I change the symbol, now it knows to follow. Now they're linked. Okay. All right. So hopefully that made sense to you guys. Let me see. And okay, so this is called a universal selector. So if you know that there are things that you want to happen on let's say you came with a midnight blue background. So you know your background wants to be midnight blue, but you know that the default text color that the browser is going to give you is black. So you know that now you want all of your text to be white, right? So what we would do is, if I go back to our example that we had before, is you'll put what's called a universal selector. And if we actually, before I do that, let me go to try yourself. If we actually look at this universal selector, you'll see that it is just pretty much the asterisk and then the declaration, okay? So that's what a universal selector, and what that means is where you put that is going to affect everything on your web page. So if I go back to the web page we were working on, this one, and I give it a universal selector, I'm going to go under styles. Now, it doesn't matter where you put it. I like to put mine at the top. You guys know how finicky I am about placement for me. So I'm going to hit Shift and 8, and that's how I'm going to get asterisk. And then I'm going to go ahead, and I don't have to put any thing else but that asterisk in there, because it stands for universal, so it knows. All right, so what I'm going to say is color white. Oops. I'm going to spell it right though. All right, color white. All right, and when I do that and I run it, all text should turn white. Now, the reason that my text did not turn white is because I already have rules in here. Remember I told you about the specificity where everything overrides your inline text will override whatever style you put in here. Well, in this case, we overrid this one because we already have rules for the color out text. Like right here, we have the color red. But if I were to take that out, then you would see that it would follow the rule that we gave. If I were to take this one out, you would see that now fun stuff is going to follow the white. And if I were to take, have any other one? If I were to take the paragraph out, it doesn't even matter because that paragraph says white. But if I want to override it, I would say color of this one, dark green. I'm playing by memory. That's a dangerous game. Okay. So now all paragraphs have changed to the dark green because I overrid it. You know what I'm saying? So you can override anything that you give a universal color to. Its purpose is just so that the default sets to anything that comes in is going to be the color white. And if you don't have anything overriding it, then anything that comes in will be that color white. So if I go and I add a new paragraph now, let me get rid of this one real quick. Let me get rid of this rule. All right, so if I go and I add a new paragraph now, you run that. And paragraph fun stuff. Actually, I can keep that paragraph. Let me go and run a new H1 or yeah. Let me do an H1 tag. All right, so if I do H2 tag, all right. If I set up H2 tag, and I set this up and I say, look at me. Right? And then I run that, then that H2 tag that's coming in is going to come in with the defaults of color white. But if I go up here and I make a style for H2, I can override that. So if I go up here and I say H2 in my CSS and I give it a style and I say, okay, I want this color to be, let me go 1, 2, and I want this color to be, what was the color I haven't used? Colors are just not, let me say purple. So if I want the color to be purple, then, and I run that, then you're going to see that H2, I can override that. So just note that this one will specify a default that you want to happen on your page for everything, but you can override that default, but at least you have a default. It's almost like a basis or a home base that you want the rules to follow, like all the rules on your page, and it's going to give you that home base, and then you just go from there. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully that made sense. It makes more sense when you start to play in it and you start to actually put these rules into play, which you guys will this week. So, but that's what those mean. That's what's going on with those. Boy, my text editor stuff's getting pretty big here. All right, let's see. And then, oh yeah, and then you can also do grouping. So this is the CSS grouping where instead of having an H1, H2, P, if you know that they're all following the same rules, you can actually group them and separate them by a period. So if, let me close some of these. I'm going to close some of these out. I actually only want this one. Okay, so I'm going to close this out. Yeah, only want this one. Yeah. All right. So if you, so if I knew, like if I wanted to affect a paragraph, H2, so I can keep these styles here and give them a different effect. So if I want all paragraphs, comma, H2s, comma, what else do I have in here? H2, the class of apparel, right? So class PARAL, and maybe the class of fun stuff. Okay. So if I wanted all of these, and I can have as many as I want, okay, but I wanted all of these to follow the, okay. If I want all of these to follow the same rule, like maybe I want all of these to have, which one am I looking for? Font. Let me look at reference real quick. Maybe I want all of these to have a border, okay? And we haven't talked about that yet, but that's here. A border is just going to put a border around them. So maybe I want all of these to have a border. And then when we do border, also, just in case you guys want to write your own, and you can click on that and it'll show you what to do. But you want to do border width, border style, and border color. And whatever order you put these in, it does not matter as long as they have it. So I'm going to right click real quick. I meant to right click. Okay. But so this right here is the border width. This is the style. And this is the color. So you want to make sure that those are in there. You can do dotted, double, and things like that. So I'm going to go back to the editor. And I'm going to say, so all of these, I want to have a border. And the border color, I want to be orange. The width, I want to be, notice I'm doing it in any order. So it doesn't even matter. It just matters that you have all three in here. That you have the width, the size, and the color. I felt like I said that wrong. Wait a minute, let me go. 5 pixels. Color and the style. So I'd say 2 in 1. So you want the type of border that you want. So if you want dotted, or if you want solid, which is the more common one, then you would set that. So if I hit run, then all of those have that orange. I'm going to change that color. Maybe purple. Let me do blue. Okay, so all of them have that color. So see that? So that's the dotted. If I wanted it to be solid, which is the normal one, or the most popular, I'll say, I can have it solid. If I want it to be double, I can have it double. If I want it to be, I think it's groove. Can't remember. It might just be that. Yeah, okay. So it's kind of groove. If I want it to be, I think it's inset. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember them all. It might be outset. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, it is. Okay, so there's inset and outset. So you have options, of what if you only want the border on one side. Let's say I just wanted to affect like the left side of the border. I can go dash and then do left. And now I just have a border on the left side, or I can do dash, I can do right, and things like that. So just know you have a lot of options, a lot to play with, and then if I wanted to give it a padding only on one side, maybe on the left, since I have that border, I can do that. Maybe 10 pixels. Okay, and so I moved it pretty much in 10 pixels. So you have that option. The reason this one looks more indented because I already have a padding on this one as well. So it took that padding plus this padding and indented it. So pretty much you have stuff to play. I do encourage you guys to go in and play with this, bookmark this one because this is your reference. So anything that you want to do in CSS is here for you. So it's all there and it's continuing to go. I'm probably making people's vertigo go crazy. So it's there. So just know it's there for you. All right. In proceeding, we should be done with this area. We are. Okay. So the next part is just telling you how to add CSS. So if you forget, it's here for you. This is where you're going to find the internal, external, inline style sheets that we've been talking about. Remember, inline is pretty much in line with your text. Internal is the embedded one, the one that's embedded inside of the head element right before the closing head tag and inside of the style tags. And you have external, which are the ones that we're going to do this week, which is where you're linking that style sheet. You're linking to a CSS style sheet. So, and then if you go in, it's just going to give you more information about what we talked about, that link that I talked about. So we're going to link it, and then it's going to introduce you to the link tag, which is an empty tag. And remember, empty tags mean they do not have a close, right, tag to it. So it's just the link tag. And then this is telling you pretty much, the link element inside the head section, which I just said, and then this one doesn't need the, so we've been doing embedded, which needed the style attribute. This one doesn't need it. It's strictly just the link. So in this one, when we're talking about the link, you have to tell it to, so the link tag by itself does nothing. You need to give it something to extend the functionality of that link tag, which you guys already know is an element, right? So the elements that, I'm sorry, not element, oh my goodness, is an attribute. So the attributes for this one is the relative attribute, which stands for relationship. We're telling it what it relates to, right? So the relationship is the style sheet. And then the href, which you guys have already worked in with images, which says, hey, this is where the style sheet sits, okay? So that's the href attribute. And so this is what it's going to look like. I always copy this so that I have it somewhere. A lot of times I'll put it in my, sorry, it's getting hot in here. My heater just came back on. Sorry. So I'll put that inside of my template sometimes. And sometimes I won't, because it might change. Like, for instance, if I decide to do a folder, which we're going to have a folder, then your href has to go into that folder, kind of like it does with the images. So it has to have that slash CSS, whatever you name your folder. But we'll talk about that as we get to it. And this is pretty much just telling you the same as HTML that can be written in the text editor, and that it must be saved with the .css extension, which, like I said, we'll be doing in a few. And here's how it looks. Okay, so if we go into the try it yourself, then this is where it's linking to the mystyles.css. So it linked. So in the mystyles.css, in that style sheet would have the information as to why this is blue. And so notice this is very clean. The HTML code is clean. It's not cluttered with the additional styles in the header and with additional styles in the body, right? Because it sits on a separate style sheet. So we'll be actually creating that shortly. And this is the style sheet that it will sit inside. So the style sheet name for this one is My CSS. In the style sheet has the body and the rules and declaration blocks that you want it to say. So it has the selector, the declaration block, and the whole thing is a rule, right? So this is the rule for body. This is the rule for H1. This is the selector, which is H1. This is the declaration block for H1. Inside the declaration blocks are the different declarations, the property value pairing, the property, then the colon, the value, then the semicolon, which ends that declaration. All right, see how it's coming together? What? All right, and then there's a special note in here that just says you do not need to add space between the property and value, such as the margin left, with the colon and the space. I add spaces to mine. I know you guys see that, but you don't need this space. So it's just telling you that you can write it either way, right? So also it's telling you that you don't need a space in between here. Don't put that space in there. It will not read it. So if you're like 20 space pixels, don't do it. All together is 20 pixels. So you do not need that space in there. Sorry. Oh my gosh. And then these are just examples that you guys can see. So if you're going to try it yourself, you'll see the examples of the style sheet, the embedded style that we already know, right? We know the embedded sits inside of these style tags, which sits inside of the head element. And then inside of the style tag are where you put the declaration blocks. So that's pretty much in the rules. So that's pretty much that part's trying to show you. Let me close this. It gets kind of crazy when it's too much open. All right. I think we're in line. You guys know that very well, which is where you have it in line with the text. So inside of the start tag that you want to affect, there's where you're setting your style, and the rules for the style sit inside of the tag. That's what we've been doing, but we're advancing. And then the multiple styles. Yep. Okay. And then you guys can read about that a little bit more, but this is showing you the examples of the link style sheets as well. And then the order that I talked to you about, where the inline style is the highest priority. It can override. The external and the internal style sheets, or internal styles. And then let's see. Yep, it's talking about priority. So to give you just a better explanation of that, and it's always here for you. That's why I go through this, so you guys know what I teach is based off of here. And then commenting. So I taught you guys how to comment with HTML. CSS is just as easy. Actually, CSS I don't know which one's easier. I've had that debate, but they're both easy. So you can comment also in CSS the same way you comment in HTML. But with CSS, it is /* and then //. Right? So with CSS, if we try it ourselves, it is just that /* and then //. So if you didn't want to see, sometimes I use comments for like troubleshooting HTML and CSS. So if I wanted to troubleshoot this, if maybe there was a problem here and I don't understand why it's not working, then I might do my /* and then I'll go right at the end and do */. Okay. And so now what happens if I run that? Did I do that right? Hang on. * and then */. Oh, okay. Now you'll see if I run that, what's not supposed to happen is we're not supposed to see it. So if you do it in the browser, we're not going to see that. I'm not quite sure why it's showing up. But what should have happened is it would have hid that. Like that would have just totally not shown up in your browser. Yeah, so not really. Hang on. Sure why, but I think what I'm going to do, let me see. And now it's piqued my curiosity, and now I have to know how this editor works. I'm going to run this. Okay, and then let me try */ let me /*, and then */ Okay. I don't know if it's because it just doesn't make sense in this browser. But these are the type of things that I was talking about of why I don't use the browsers that are pre-built in for Dreamweaver and stuff like that, because we would see stuff like this, but we would look at it on the browser and it's not there. So the Chrome browser, it should not be there. What should happen is you're not seeing this sentence at all. Oh, I do know why. Okay. So because I'm in HTML. Duh. So in HTML, if I want to comment this out, this would be where I do this. And then, yep. So I'm glad that happened, because this is one of those things where you'll be confused whether you're in HTML or CSS or not. So now when we do this, we should not see this. CSS comments are shown in the output. Very interesting. Or unless the browsers, because we're talking about this. Yeah, I'm not quite sure why it's showing that. That's weird. So in CSS, let me see though. Let's see if we can comment this out. This is a single line comment slash, and then star slash. Okay. So it commented out the style. So the style isn't working. Okay, so it did exactly what it should have here. I'm just not quite sure why it's not doing it here. Maybe because the lesson's on CSS and maybe it's just programmed that way. They program it, so maybe I just wasn't supposed to show you that there. But anyway, so here for CSS, we have our comment, and it's making sure that it's stopping that style or whatever we have the comment on. It's going to block that style, and that's its purpose. So if I were to take this close though, and I were to bring it down here, then what should happen is none of this should be read because I've commented out from this single line comment all the way to red. So we'll see. Okay, cool. All right. So it is working correctly. It's just that I guess in this browser, it's whatever it's talking about. That's what you do. And nothing extra. So, all right. So it did comment that out. And now none of those styles are working as they should not be working here. And if I go and I take it away, put it back up here and run it, then we'll see that we have our styles back again. Okay. All right, so that's comments, and that's how CSS comments work, same as HTML. And then this is talking about HTML comments as well, where, see that, where these paragraphs should not be read. Let's try it here. These paragraphs will be read, okay? And let's just try it. Fingers are crossed, because I like to know. I just like to know. Run it. Okay, sweet. All right. So it's working here. So I guess they program it as they should. So when we talk about comments for HTML, we should be in the HTML section. When we talk about comments for CSS, we should be in the CSS section. So but notice none of these are showing because I commented them out. So now all from here to here isn't showing. So I'm going to put it back where it was, run it again, and now you'll see that they've come back. All right. All right, so. All right, and so I'm not going to go in detail with these. You guys can run through these yourself, but this is just pretty much talking about color, which we've already talked about. Text color, you just use the word color, and it's going to change it. Borders, same thing, which we just did with that and the color as well. All right, so now I'll go into backgrounds, and this is really just the background color that we've been using. And it's just telling you pretty much that you can use the colors, then the color names, like red. And if you look in references, you'll see the references to the names as well. We can also use hex values, which are my favorite. I always like using hex values. And you can also use RGB values, which we're doing with the red, green, and blue channels. And you can also use alpha, but it's not talking about that yet. So, but just pretty much know that you can use that. And you guys can read through that. You can also use transparency. Opacity. So opacity goes from 0 to 1, which is like going from 0 to 100. So as you can imagine, if you wanted 50% opacity, then you would do 0.05, right, for 50% or 30% or, or have you. And this is showing you what it's going to look like. So you guys can play with that if you'd like. And then this is the RGBA with transparency, which is the same RGB colors, but then there's an alpha channel so that you can change the transparency of that one. All right, and you guys can go through these. This is for background image, background repeat, attachment, and shorthand. Super important though is, so if you put an image in, it is important for you guys to go through these areas, because so one is you put an background image in. The second is once you put an image in, it's going to expand whatever space that it has, But if there is room for it, it's going to repeat. So if you want to stop the repeat or you want it to repeat, you're going to have to control it through background repeat. An attachment in shorthand. And actually, I think these could be a separate video by themselves, but I'm just giving you an introduction to the background color and the image itself. We'll talk about everything else as we go. And then CSS Borders, I gave you a taste of that just a second ago, which is where, you did the border on all sides. You can also round the corners. So in that example that I had, if we wanted to set, and these are the inside and the inside. Okay, and the ridge. Yep, there they are. They're right there. Okay, so if we wanted to round the corners, it would be like a border radius. And if you want to know how to do that, you can click over here to the side. So anything that you want to do, click here, and then it's going to show you that it's the border radius property, and then you set the border radius property whatever you want. So if we go back to if we go back to this example where I have the border on here, where is that? Which one did I set? Okay, right here. All right, then I can say, we can go and open that up and we can say border radius and maybe, I don't know, 20 pixels just to check it out, see what happens. I keep hitting save. 20 pixels and run it, and you're going to see that they are round. And it's a pretty neat effect, especially when you have it just on one side. But if I change the border from left to being all around, you'll see that radius follows it all around, So, and then I can change padding left from just left to padding. Okay. And now you'll see, so you'll start to see how these boxes form that we're going to be talking about soon. So like if the boxes, remember the outside of the box is margin. So if we wanted to give these boxes some type of margin, we want to give these boxes some type of margin. We can say margin, say 10 pixels, and then they'll do their thing. If you spell margin right, they'll do their thing, and notice how now the margin has moved up a little bit to give them 10 pixels in between. So if we said something smaller, then you'll see that they tighten up just a little bit, because remember, margins happen outside of the box. So it's how close you want this box to be to this box, to this box, to this box. Remember, moving companies, stacking boxes, and typically it stacks them right next to each other. But in these cases, we have H1s, which, remember, are programmed with spaces. H1s and paragraphs, they're already programmed to have spaces on the top, bottom, left, and right. So now what we're doing is overriding that space and saying, oh, well, nope, I only want a space of 5 pixels between them, or I only want a space of 2 pixels between them, or what have you. Okay. So that's what that does. And then you can go through the margin, padding, the height, the width. I just talked about margins. Padding happens on the inside of the box. The height and the width of the box, we'll talk about that now, where you can take this same one and, well, I'll tell you what it says. All right, so we can affect it through the height and the width properties. It's telling you that auto is really the default. Length, the way that length reads is in width, inches. That's what the IN is. Pixels, right? Centimeters, and etc. So you can read pretty much almost any measurement. And then percentages, defines the width, and then initial is the default value. Inherit, which means it inherits from the parent. So when we talk about HTML and we go over here, if we look at our HTML itself, there's a parent-child sibling relationship in everything. So the parent, the ultimate parent of them all, well, in this case, is body. The ultimate parent of everything that we want to be seen is body, right? So body is a parent. Then, right, and this is where body opens, the body element, and this is where body closes. So body is the parent, and then body had a child. The child is wrapper, right? Because this is the nesting, right? And then this is the wrapper element, right? So the wrapper is a child to body. But then, so this is why I indent. So if we were doing this the way I like to do it, to show hierarchy, now you'll start to see this come together. So this is the parent, this is the child. So wrapper is a child to body. But then wrapper had children, right? So wrapper had this class of Perel, this paragraph, this fun stuff, and H2. Okay, so now wrapper had children, and that's its nested link. And we can go further nesting if we add stuff to it. But for now, this is where we are. Okay, so this is the parent-child sibling relationship. So body is a parent, wrapper is a child to body, then wrapper had children, right? So these are wrapper's children, the P tags and the H2 tags, right? And then the children have siblings. So this P is a sibling to this P is a sibling to this P, and this P is a sibling to the H2. So all of these are siblings. So there is a parent-child sibling relationship. Understanding that is what's going to help you understand when we talk about things like inherit. So inherit means that you're inheriting values from the parent value. So that means that if I go back to our example, then wrapper inherits style from body, which is why we could say wrapper 90% and it knew what we were talking about. We were talking about 90% of body because body is its parent. Okay, so everything that we do inherits the styles or the attributes or features, however you want to say it, from its parents. Okay, so the ultimate parent is body, right? And then body had a child, which is wrapper, and then wrapper is inheriting the styles from body, and then wrapper had children of the paragraph and the H2s, which are inheriting the styles from, its parent. So that's all that means. That's what it's talking about. You're gonna see that more and more, but just understanding that there's that parent-child sibling relationship is going to help you when it talks these terminologies. All right. Let's see. Width and height. Okay. And then there's a max width and a min width. Max width means the maximum width that you want this to go. So let's say you know that what you're designing a website for, a particular phone. So if you're an Apple designer and you know that your phones do not go, say, any wider than, I don't know, 1600 pixels, they go way wider. But if, let's just say it didn't go any wider than 1600 pixels, then when you design, you're going to design to make sure that it's a max width of 1600 pixels, that it doesn't go any wider than that. So that's what max width is. And then there's min width, which is whatever your minimum is. Let's say but for a certain area, you don't want it to go any more than half, so more than 800 pixels. So you're going to say up, or any less than 800 pixels. So you're going to say, okay, well, the max width is 1600, but the minimum width I want is 800. So you can define things instead of using width, with max width or min width. And you can read more about it in here on your own. Okay, now we're where I want us to be. But this is going to take some time to explain. So what I'm going to do is in this video here, and then in the next video, we'll go into the box model. I want you guys to breathe and go, take a breath and all that fun stuff in between. All right, so we'll go into box models in just a few.